I get a lot of really disdainful and sometimes abusive anti-white comments, which usually are some combination of a repetition of historical narratives surrounding, let's say slavery or genocide or colonialism or imperialism, and most of these narratives are exaggerated or outright fabricated. Just to go over a few, the Indian genocide narrative, most people act like this is a historical event that involved the slaughter of millions. Well, the Census Department provides an answer for that, and in all of the American Indian Wars in North America between the United States government or various subdivisions of it, or individuals within it, and Native American tribes, there were something like 45,000 Indians killed over 200 years. 250 years, something like that. And 20,000 whites, by the way. Not just combatants, but civilians, men, women, and children. So it was definitely a fight. It went both ways. The scale of it wasn't immense, and our ancestors won. Tough shit. That's what happens, Or the Mexican narrative. Again, you have all these millions of Aztlan loyalists streaming into the United States. Not just the Southwest, which they claim as historically their own, but the rest of it as well. And they act like this land was stolen from them, and they have some kind of superior historical claim to the land, but this is total nonsense. There were 6,000 Tejanos in Texas to the 30,000 Empresario American immigrants, and the Tejanos revolted against Santa Anna's government along with the Empresarios. So, if their culture has been marginalized in the meantime, and by the way, they were allowed to keep their land, they were given the legal status of whites, etc. So if their culture has been, let's say marginalized or degraded in the meantime, they don't have anybody to blame for that but the Mexican government for allowing too much immigration into a sparsely populated frontier region to maintain control of it. But they've also benefited in many ways, from the magic dirt. The dirt became magical once it was subject to Anglo common law and, trustworthy norms and institutions and all that kind of stuff. So, it's been at least a trade-off for them. They weren't displaced. They weren't dispossessed. They might have been demographically supplanted, but it's at very least a mixed bag there. And the most populous of the territories seized by the United States following the Mexican-American War was New Mexico, which had 25,000 Mexicans, and you had California, which had 15,000. So you're talking about a literal handful of people in a sparsely populated frontier region that the Mexican government, for reasons of its own creation, couldn't maintain control over. And, there's no historical connection between Aztecs from Mesoamerica and those territories. There's none. Those people coming in from further south, they have no historical connection to that land. So all of these narratives, and the slavery one too, are either fabricated or grossly exaggerated. And yet, they articulate these historical grievances in a very hyperbolic and overwrought way. And they do it, I don't know all the reasons why they do it. Maybe they think it'll demoralize us. But if you're the kind of white guy who gets demoralized, you're probably already killing yourself with opioids. I just don't know what motivates them. Maybe these are the narratives that fire them up. and help them to organize, and they think it's going to have some kind of effect on us. I don't know. Maybe they're just doing a kind of in-group signaling to bolster each other. I don't know all the reasons why they do this stuff, but basically what they're trying to do, in effect, with this rhetoric, is to create a property right for themselves in white people and in everything that white people own and everything that white people produce. And obviously, that's not going to be acceptable to most white people. And there's no reason why it should be. Like, there's nothing in that deal for us. So, I don't know why we would accept it, or why it would be acceptable to us. You would have to be some kind of really weak-minded simpleton to fall for this nonsense, because, you know, even before I was woke to these questions, I basically intuited that that's what was going on, and, you know, it's pretty freaking obvious. And not only that, but if you know even the smallest amount of history, you know how incomplete and one-sided and exaggerated all of these narratives are. So, where am I going with all this? The point is, this kind of rhetoric, these kind of narratives, they don't lead to any kind of cooperative solution. So if these people are interested in cooperating, you know, they're not adopting means and they're not adopting rhetoric capable of leading to that, because what they're attempting to create, a property right in us, a property right in our stuff for them in perpetuity, because these narratives are not falsifiable, right? There's no historical, you know, there's no benchmark within any of these narratives for saying that the historical grievances have been rectified or atoned for, right? It's something that can go on forever. There's no way to satiate the demands arising from these narratives, okay? Because as long as there's any inequality, you know, they're going to try and use these narratives to seize what they want but can't create for themselves. And even if there was no inequality, even if they were totally dominant in every way, and, you know, we were reduced to nothing, you know, they would still hate us and want to finish us off. So there's no possibility of cooperation contained within these narratives. They're purely parasitic. They're purely hostile. They're purely malicious. And, you know, they're not the kind of thing that any sensible thinking white person can tolerate, or would be willing to accept. There are plenty of insensible, non-thinking white people that accept them for now, but the main reason for that is just that their cost hasn't become great enough or obvious enough in everyday life. You know, the greater the cost grows, the more people are going to have to sit up and think. Obviously. So there's no cooperative solution. There's no win-win. There's no basis for future cooperation contained within these narratives. There's only parasitism and conflict. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with history, but conflict with white people is not the greatest idea. It really isn't, because we're pretty good at it. So, you know, this kind of stuff is a dead end. And I would think that any thinking POC would have to understand that. And a lot of the more intelligent and more reasonable ones obviously have figured it out. You know, you have the tokens over on the Republican side who basically have realized that the best way for them is to just go along with this civic nationalism stuff and and embrace an American identity and talk about bland, deracinated, conservative Western values. And if you're a reasonably capable POC, that is the best way for you, undoubtedly. If you're not reasonably capable, then that option really isn't open to you, because the trappings of Western civilization, which is fundamentally meritocratic, are largely beyond your reach in that case. And so that's why they resort to this parasitic, hostile, combative rhetoric in so many cases. But, even a lot of the reasonably capable ones have adopted and internalized it. So, I don't know what you chalk that up to. Maybe to Marxist indoctrination, maybe to ethnic solidarity, something like that. But my point is, there's nowhere this stuff can go. It's a dead end. It's going to eventually, basically totally paint itself into a corner and become useless even to its least capable adherents who can achieve nothing of value on their own. And so, I really wish people would just cut it out. I don't expect that they will, but I really wish they would just cut it out. And I'm getting pretty sick and tired of hearing a lot of this stuff. This stuff instantly marks you as a hostile, unreasonable belligerent, right? Who there's no possibility of negotiating with, no possibility of cooperating with, no possibility of coexisting with. That's all it marks you as. And even where this stuff is true, harping on it constantly, stuff that's hundreds of years old that nobody alive today had anything to do with, that's not something people are going to want to cooperate with you on. That's not something people are going to want to submit to you over. That's not something people are going to want to hand stuff over to you on account of. So, it's really, and it's fundamentally dishonest because it's a framing where you're focusing in on certain things and excluding all others. Like, none of these people give Western civilization any credit for any of the things that they enjoy, which Western civilization has created. None of these people give white people any credit for anything, or Western civilization, or America, or whatever. And so to just focus on this narrow set of negative grievances is fundamentally dishonest. And the purpose of all dishonesty is parasitism. Right? You're trying to get something for nothing, or you're trying to get it at a discount. And so, that's why people reject this stuff. That's why they intuit it as hostile and parasitic, because it fundamentally is hostile and parasitic. And that's why this stuff can ultimately go nowhere. Like, there's no possibility of cooperation or even coexistence contained within this narrative, within this rhetoric.